Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday, April 29th regular meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Roll call, Mrs. Cropper.
Ms. Sanborn?
Present.
Mr. Merchant?
Present.
Mr. Lewis?
Present.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Present.
Mr. Waldman?
Present.
Okay.
Madam President, I'd like to amend the agenda for this evening to include two things we've asked for that are not on it.
Okay.
First, we need to add discussion and about getting an RFP for attorneys. And second, we need to add consideration for membership for at least part of us for SBLC.
All right.
If I need to make a motion to do so, I will. If not, I'll like Mrs. Cropper can add it in there where it fits.
Well, Ms. Sanborn and I had a conversation earlier today about including that in under board business. So we'll add it to the, if it's acceptable, we'll add that to the agenda for under that part of the agenda.
Well, I think he wants to do more than just discuss it, I believe. Is that right, Jim?
Correct. We need to have an RFP sent out. And if we're going to make decisions around the 1st of June, we can't wait till June to send out RFPs. We need to send them out, and I think that it's pretty standard procedure that can probably be sent out looked at by this Friday, and then we can send out on Monday.
Well, again, I would recommend that we stick with the agenda as presented and include conversations around both of those issues in under board business.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Lewis?
As long as it's discussed at this point, and we can make make motions on accepting or having it done, yes.
Is that an acceptable format where we can discuss it, and then if there's a determination to put it on as an agenda item, we can vote on that?
There is not a law that says the Board of Education has to follow Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order would say, yes, that you have a motion to add it to the agenda if there is going to be a vote, because we already have on the agenda board discussion. So if we're only discussing, we would not have to add a motion to amend the agenda. But like I said, the board meetings, there's no law that they follow Robert's Rule of Order, and to be honest, we have added motions in the past without adding that particular item to the agenda. So either way would be acceptable from a legal standpoint.
Okay.
Agreed. Legally, we don't have to follow Robert's Rules of Order. It's a good guideline, it's a good practice, but it's not necessary.
Law.
That's very true. We can kind of do what we want to do, but it's good to follow those rules. As long as we can put a motion on the floor and vote on it in discussions, I've got no problem with it. We can do it then.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Public comment. Student officers of the Glen Estee Dance Company, the cruise performance. We want to show our gratitude for giving the permission to go to perform overseas. Please step forward.
Hi, my name is Katie Parker, and I'm the president of Glen Estee Dance Company. These are our fellow officers. We would just like to say thank you for allowing us to go on our performance cruise. It was a great experience and a lot of fun. We got to take a master class and perform for many people on the cruise ship who enjoyed very much of our performance. And we wrote you guys letters to say thank you from everyone on our dance company. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And are you the young lady who had the injury on the trip?
No.
Oh, okay. I know we had an injury on the trip, and I saw the boot on you this evening, so I was wondering if you were the person. So very glad that it was a great trip, and I know you had a great opportunities to do some performing in arenas that you wouldn't necessarily be performing in.
Yeah,
So.
it was amazing. Thank you.
And we've seen you perform, at least I know that I have, and I know that you represented us very well. So thank you for all that you
Thank
guys
you
did.
very much.
Thank you. Great. Approval of minutes, Mrs. Cropper.
First item on the treasurer's agenda this evening are the minutes from our last regular meeting, which was held April 14th. I respectfully request that you approve those minutes as presented.
You have heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
And a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper.
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Motion carried. Treasurer's business, donations.
Next item on the agenda are the donations received over the last month. And as typical, we have quite a lengthy list, so we're very pleased that we have this many business partners and also individuals who see value in donating to our schools. The first donations to Glen Estee High School. The Glen Estee High School Athletic Boosters donated $500. Mercy Healthplex donated a gift certificate for 3-month membership. And Everything Bagels donated 4 $5 gift cards for bagels, and those were to benefit the prom. WT Elementary received several donations as well. 3M Company donated bandages and dressings for the safety committee. Walgreens also donated some items for the safety kits. A couple individuals, Vincent Simpkins and Glenn Bailey, donated 15 large first aid kits for the safety kits. Lowe's also donated 30 buckets to hold emergency kits. DonorsChoose.org donated 2 mini iPad minis for the social communications classroom. Target Beachmont also donated supplies, books, and beanbag chairs for a 2nd grade class to support one of our first year teachers. In addition, Glen Estee Dance Club received $54 from Buffalo Wings and Rings, which they will put towards production costs. That said, as Ohio law requires, I respectfully request that you approve those donations.
You've heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes.
Mr. Merchant?
Yes.
Mr. Waldman?
Yes.
Motion carried. Approval of the 2014-2015 school lunch prices.
Next item on the agenda are the school lunch prices for the coming year. And I know that you have that information in your packet. I believe it's a 15 cent increase for the elementary and the middle schools. And as you've seen with some information that was provided to you, the federal government requires that we use their price calculator in determining what our lunch prices would be, and that's in order that we continue to receive the federal subsidies that they send us, totaling just under $1 million. So we obviously want to follow their guidelines and set our prices accordingly. We do take a look at surrounding school districts to distribute the increase that's required by the feds so that we're in agreement and competitive with surrounding districts. That said, I respectfully request that you approve the lunch prices as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
Discussion?
One more question besides the ones I emailed you.
Okay.
Does this tie our hands having to follow the guidelines of the administration in the White House that providing the kids with foods they won't eat, or is this back to where we can actually serve the kids food that they will eat?
Unfortunately, it does. it does tie our hands, and we will follow federal guidelines as far as providing our students with healthy lunches. May not be what they desire, but it's definitely going to be within the federal guidelines for health.
The alternative to that would be if we didn't, then they would not provide us with the additional compensation for those qualifying for the free and reduced meals.
Very true.
And I love when my child comes home and says, guess what they served us for breakfast today? And it's stupid stuff. Yogurt and pretzels. I mean, it just doesn't seem like that would be a balanced meal, but according to their guidelines, it is. So.
Oh, there was just recently a study released that this garbage, this faux science they put out a few decades ago that you don't eat fats, that is bad for you. They found that and they was blaming that on the obesity, and they found that really it's all the carbohydrates we eat that are making us fat, not the fats. So
There are new standards coming out for next year, too,
Oh, good.
even more stringent.
Oh, good. Terrific.
Any more
But I
discussion?
appreciate the questions you asked today. They were good questions.
Any more discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
yes,
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn.
Yes. Motion carried. Awarding roofing bids. Mrs. Cropper?
The next item on our agenda has to do with awarding the roofing bids to True Craft for the Glen Estee Middle School and Franklin Roofing for Glen Estee High. I know that you've got a copy of the bid sheets and you've already seen the good news. The good news continues. I feel like for the prior 9 years that I sat in this chair, I brought nothing but bad financial news. And with the economy turning around just a tad, it just seems everything for a change is going our way in the financial department, and this is no exception. These bids were, our architects had told us that they would expect probably 3 companies only to be bidding. Instead, we got 7, and the prices were well below what we thought they were going to be. And I don't know if Mr. Dyer, who administrates the process, if he would like to speak to the bids.
Sure, I can speak what I know about the bids. We were happy with the bids, raised a little bit of concern, and because we go out to bid for nearly $1 million and come in at 367 for, I believe it's 367, that creates a little bit of concern. We went back, we did have a meeting with the architect one day last week, had a meeting with the architect and had them out here. We went over the spec again to make sure we didn't miss something in the specifications. And looking at all that, because they're working off of data they gather from other bid openings and talking to roofing contractors. But it appears that just the environment was good at that point. People needed work. We're a little concerned about the contractor, especially for the bigger roof at Glen Estee East. We've not heard a lot about Franklin Roofing Company. They used to be a big contractor. They've done work such as the convention center and things like that, but we've gone back. The architects talked to a lot of people. They're out of the Cleveland area. Talked to people up there. They seem to be a great roofing company. Took a few years during the recession to do more residential. And are coming back doing commercial work. They've got a full crew. They've got a service company. And their last rating on the Better Business Bureau was an A+ company. So it looks like that from all standpoints, the architect is recommending we award the bid to both of these companies. And we're excited about the low bids. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I know I tried to Google Franklin Roofing, and I couldn't find them, and I was very concerned.
Yes.
And I said, well, maybe I should Google this again. Maybe it's my eyes. So I Googled it again. I still couldn't come up with anything. And I said, well, maybe they're located in Franklin, Ohio. So I put Franklin Roofing, Columbus, Ohio. I still couldn't come up with anything. So I'm like, I need to talk to Mr. Dyer about this.
Yes, they have, like I said, they're kind of now in the, more in the residential. They have 17 full-time employees now coming back in the commercial world. But the people out of Cleveland, the architects that talk folks in Cleveland say they're an excellent company. They're a great company. They're just getting started back in the commercial world. They've done a lot of that work, and nobody had a bad word to say about them. And so when we're looking at the lowest responsible bidder, we couldn't find anything to say they're not responsible bidders because of their reputation they have, other than the fact that they're looking for work. They were excited about getting some work.
Do they have people in this area, or they're going to have to send a team down here?
There's having to send a team here. They have a service company that travels throughout the state. They're used to that. They do have just a service company, because some of the questions we had is, what if it rains like tonight and we've got a leak, you know? And their answer is they have service company, or if it gets to one of those and we needed somebody before that, then we would call somebody and just bill them for that in an emergency situation. And they seem to be connected with other roofers in the area that they can call on to give them a helping hand should they need to do that in an emergency situation. They seem well clipped. They intend to send a crew to stay here during the week and work on the roof and get it done. They were pretty excited about it. The architect has talked to them. And like I said, they're a little hard to find if you Google them. I was able to find some things on them, but not a lot. And so we had to go to some other resources to try to find out more about it. And that's more the people in Cleveland, up in that area, the big contractors and the general contractors. Gave them a good recommendation. So we're excited about the low bid. May require a little extra work on our management side. We're not sure, but either way, we're prepared to do that. Make sure we get a good roof.
Mr. Dyer, was there any consideration looking at the fact that there was 2 companies that came in lowest for each of the buildings? Was there any consideration to calling the one that you're going to give to the high school and saying, could you match the bid of the other company to keep both buildings done by the same company?
What we do is we go out in our bid proposals we accepted. We had a bid for each roof and a combined bid, so that we keep it fair. And either one of the companies could have bid both roofs and came in low. But when you look at the low bid, with the one being lower on Glen Estee Middle, one being lower on Glen Estee High, that was the most economical for us.
Right, but if you called the one that was going to do it for more expensive with the high school, could you call them and say, hey, another company is willing to do it cheaper? Could you match that bid to keep the business with the same company?
We'd like to, but it's a public bid. We have
It's a public
to
bid. I
advertise
gotcha.
that, yes.
That's where the laws come into play, that you just can't.
Yes,
Be business smart.
we just can't go out and start shopping them at that point, but it is a fair process, and it's the way we did it. But yeah, it makes sense, but we just can't do it. We'd love to do that.
Question.
Yes.
TrueCraft is local?
They're out of Milford.
Okay.
Yes.
They've been in business 4 years. They have an A- rating,
Okay. Yes.
and they're very well, I looked them up, and they're very well organized in the Milford area.
Yeah.
I've looked up references, and they were very highly recommended.
Yeah. The gentleman that owns the company, his father worked for Forche Roofing, 40-some years, I believe, and is a well-respected man in the market. Gentleman in the roofing world, and his son owns TrueCraft, and he does work for him on a limited basis. And they're also a fairly new company, trying to establish themselves in the commercial world also. They come highly recommended also.
Correct. That's what I found out.
Yes, good. Thanks for doing your homework. That's a good thing. Yes. Any other questions?
Their bid didn't bother me as much as the Franklin bid, because there's not that much difference between the low bid and the second low bid, but between Franklin and the next low bid is a considerable chunk of change.
It is, yes. And so it's like, we,
Concerned us too when we.
yes, it's a
looked at-
concern. It's like, did we miss something? And they, like I said, the architect did call to Franklin and talk to him, the owner of Franklin, and he's like, we just need the work. We know we got a low bid. We just need to work. But it's always concern of, did we miss something, or they see something, but it appears they went over the specifications with him, and he's very confident he can do it. So I think yes, we have no choice but to recommend them, and we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you.
That said, I respectfully request that we award the roofing bids to TrueCraft for Glen Estee Middle and Franklin Roofing for Glen Estee High East.
Okay, you've heard the recommendations from Mrs. Cropper. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? I'll second. Discussion anymore?
Yeah, Steve, you've dealt with this before?
I'm sorry.
You've dealt with this kind of
I have,
roofing problems before?
absolutely. And
What's good to you?
Ed's right on track that he's done the due diligence, and
Yeah.
I'm supportive of moving in this direction.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Merchant,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn.
Yes. Motion carried. Treasurer's comments, Mrs. Cropper?
Next item on the treasurer's agenda, Ms. Sanborn had asked me if I would give a summary of the 5-year forecast. And take me just a minute to get my presentation up here. Huh? What is the wrong thing? I lost it. I hit the wrong, there we go. I did. Hit the wrong one. As I said, Ms. Sanborn asked me if I would give an explanation of the 5-year forecast and the reasons behind the fact that we now find ourselves in a much better place than we were at this time last year. So to start out, I wanted to talk about the 5-year forecast and what its purpose is, really. The 5-year forecast is a planning tool. It takes a look at where we've been as a district. It has 3 years of history, financial history on it. It takes a look at what we're doing today, what we're doing this year, what the expenses that arise from our programs and services are, and what the revenues that we're getting in, both from our local and state, which are our largest revenues. It also uses past history and what we know about the future to project into the future. You change those assumptions that you see going into the future. We change our staffing. It changes. The state passes a new budget. We get new revenues. It changes. Every assumption that you make will change the 5-year forecast. There are a lot of challenges as far as revenues and expenses when we go to estimate what's going to happen in the future. And there are things that we have absolutely no control over that happen in the coming 5 years that we use our best guess based upon past history and what we know today to project what will happen. But we have absolutely no control over making those projections come true. And you see that those are huge revenue items. We have no control over how much money we're going to get from the state, no control over the property valuations and collections that comes through the county. We can't influence inflation. We can't influence the economy. When the economy is going well, that trickles down to us. When the economy is doing well, the state has more state taxes to distribute to local entities. When the economy is doing well, people are paying their property taxes. And also when the economy is doing well, people are buying, selling houses, moving up. That drives the property valuations up. All of those factors influence how much revenue we're going to receive, and we have no control over any of them. We have no control over the instructional needs to a certain extent that our students come in with. We have no control over what disabilities, what challenges that our students that arrive at our doors have. We simply react to fill those needs. So again, the greater the need, the greater the challenge, the greater the disability, typically the larger financial resources that have to be applied to that, both in terms of amount of staffing and sometimes materials and supplies, medical personnel. So again, instructional needs that we have no control over will dictate what happens in the future to our ending cash balance on our 5-year forecast. Also, legislative mandates, we've all been there. Those of us who have been in this business for 30 years know that in the middle of the year they can make a new law, a change that will just wreck your 5-year forecast for that year. And of course, it wrecks year one, and that has a rippling effect through the next 5 years. Some things we can control. To a certain extent, we can control our personnel. We can control, to a certain extent, how many kids we have in a classroom. We control staffing through our negotiated agreements, but once we have that agreement, we have to live by it. So it's partially controllable. Instructional programs and services. We control them to a certain extent, especially the ones that that go further away from core basic services. We control those to a certain extent. Contracts are partially controllable. We can certainly bid them, but there is a minimum amount that we're going to have to pay, and we do tend to see services continue to go up and up and up. Supplies and materials, we can simply cut our budget and do without a lot of time. So it's partially controllable, but we do have to have paper. We do have to have ink cartridges. To a certain extent, we do have to have these things. So I just wanted to give you these lists to see the certain things that we think about and what goes into preparing a 5-year forecast and what's controllable and not controllable. And again, like I said, we wanted to discuss our cash balance and what has happened. Well, to start with, let's take a look at what happened to our cash balance in the past 3 years. And one of the things I want to point out, all of this is in excruciating detail in this book. So you have this, and it does have 3 years history. It has 3 years history on every line item. So you can take a look at that. But what has hurt us the most, and I spoke to it a little bit earlier, we have spent the last actually the last 6 years, we've only had one tiny increase. So our revenues have gone from a high of just over 69 million to 64.5 million last year. Now actually, that's not sitting on the screen, right, but you've got your sheet. And actually, I want to point out that the 64.5 million, I've taken out the advance that we got in that. So if you look at actual revenues and actually at the forecast, you're going to see 2.3 million more in there. But we borrow that money, and borrow is a bad term to use. We asked for that money early to put it at the end of 13. That money was not meant to 13, and in this schedule that you have here, I've taken it out so that I show a consistent revenue stream and what the increases and decreases have been consistently over the past 6 years. And as you can see, it's been very negative. Revenues are going down, and again, I relate that directly back to the economy, both from a local and a state standpoint. Our state revenues have averaged 2.6% decrease in every year. That's an average annual decrease over the last 6 years. So our state funding has accounted for the largest percentage of that. And there's just a graph of the percentage increase or decrease over the past years for the people who like to look at graphs. I prefer to look at numbers. What else has affected our cash balance over the last 3 years' history in the 5-year forecast? Well, we've made many expenditure reductions, and we've agonized, and we've cut staff, we've cut programs. We've had to pick between two bad choices because making cuts in a school district that's already spending below state average is never good. But those expenditures for the past 3 years were just simply not enough to keep up with revenues, and our cash balance kept going down over the past 3 years. One of the things that I want to point out is that when we talk about our cash balance and some of the comments we're hearing, well, how can that be? It basically goes down to the fact of revenues, and we have had third-party verifications of our fiscal instability. These projections, our cash balances, were looked at monthly by the ODE monitor. The auditors state through their performance audit looked at our cash balance, and in fact, we've gone over the recommendations that they made to help us increase that, and we've implemented a lot of those, which has been one thing that has helped that cash balance increase to the point where it is now. And again, our financial audit has verified our cash balances without exception. Again, I just wanted to show you that we have in fact been reducing expenditures over the last several years, but it's simply just not been enough to keep up with the revenue reductions. And one of the things that our ODE monitor has been saying is that our problem is not so much an expenditure problem, because all of our expenditures looked good in comparison to state average. As a matter of fact, we are $1,700 per pupil under state average. We spend more on instruction than the average school district and less on administration. So ODE found our expenditures to be in good stead and more favorable when they spoke of them. However, it was our revenues that kept decreasing. The one thing they did say about our expenditures just recently is that the cuts have become counterproductive, and that the cuts we had made in programming were driving students away who were taking revenues with them. So cuts to expenditures were hurting revenues more than they were helping expenditures, and we've made some steps recently to correct that, and you're to be commended for that. Again, just there's the third-party verifications of what we've done in the past. Looking towards the future, what have we done to improve that cash balance? There have been many concessions by the staff. They've taken salary steps that they've given up for this year and the next 2 years. That alone added $8 million to the bottom line over 5 years. Our insurance premiums have gone in 18 months, have gone from a breakdown of 92% paid by the board to 84% now paid by the board, and this is for all staff. And over the course of 5 years, that adds back $4.4 million to the bottom line. So this was a huge help by all of our staff, from our non-cert unions to our administrators, to Dr. Klein, to myself. Everyone took these cuts. And all told, it put back over $12 million to the bottom line. So that was a huge amount of it. We continue to make reductions year after year. The administration looks at where we can combine classes, where staffing can be equalized on both campuses. Dr. Klein has talked a lot about what we've done in staffing to be able to get more efficient in our providing programs and services. And the staff has worked very hard to make those efficiencies without hurting the programs and services that we provide. We continue to evaluate all contracts that we have. We bid our health insurance every year. We're working very hard with our transportation contractor to squeeze some more routes, to squeeze some more efficiencies out of there. And in a bit of good news, like I said, I've sat here for 9 years and I have brought you nothing but bad news. The economy was going down, revenues were decreasing. It was horrible. That has turned around. As I said earlier, we've had 6 years before this year of state revenue decreases, an average of 2.6% per year. With the new biennial budget, in which we're in the first year of, we're getting a 3% increase, and next year we get a 10.5% increase. The 5-year forecast flatlines state revenues for budgets that have not yet been announced. But what the 10.5% increase did was add $2.5 million. 10.5% to West Claremont increase on state revenue adds $2.5 million. Times that starting next year by 4 years, and with the 3% increase this year, we're over $10 million. So revenues have increased. So what ODE told us needed to happen has in fact happened. Revenues have increased. Some other miscellaneous good news as well. Property taxes. 4 years ago, property taxes were $34.9 million. The next 3 years, the 3 years history on the 5 years forecast, you see them drop by $600,000 for 2 years, and then it dropped by another $300,000. So it dropped from $34.9 million to $30 million at one point. We bounced back up last year, $34.8 million, and this year the numbers are coming in strong again. So good news again. Our property taxes have rebounded. Casino taxes. well, casino revenue, I guess, not necessarily taxes. Well, they finally came in. Last year we got 179,000. This year we got 429,000. Good news, revenue's increasing. I'm certainly glad I didn't put the 1.2 million in that the state forecast that West Claremont would receive when they were selling the casino to the people of the great state of Ohio. So we're glad we didn't take the state's advice and put that in. As a matter of fact, we kind of held off putting anything in until the show me the money. I'm kind of a show me the money conservative type of person. So all these things, all this good news has contributed to our cash balance. As you look at this chart from 2008 to 2012, going down, 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 as we start to make cuts, revenues come back. Now we're going up, up, up until the inflationary factor takes over in 17 and 18. One of the things I wanted to point out, though, the red line way at the top, that's the line that the state of Ohio says we should have in our cash balance. 2 to 3 months worth of expenditures on hand at year end, and it should be at $15 million. We're still woefully short of that, but our cash balance has certainly turned around to where we at least have breathing room at this point in time. So that was just kind of, like I said, just something short and sweet. If that's as short as I could make the story, here's the long story. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those at this point.
I did have a question regarding that last slide there. What factors are you considering for 2017 and 18 that caused the slope downward as opposed to continue that slope upward?
One of the major things that happens there is our contracts run out the end of 16.
What contracts would that be?
All of our union contracts run out at the end of, at that point, and legally we will be contracted to start the step movement again. I think at that time we definitely are going to have to take a look at that. We know we've looked at our salaries. We've got them set for the next 3 years. In comparison with other districts, they're woefully low. So that'll be a conversation we need to have as we get closer to that point in time.
Any other discussion?
Mrs. Cropper, do you provide updates on the 5-year forecast, like twice a year, or do you do them annually, or?
Excuse me, I actually keep them in my office. I haven't typically presented that to the board. That hasn't been something the prior board wanted to see, but if that's a change, now that we have new faces on the board, I'd certainly be able to happy to do that. The 5-year forecast is due to the state of Ohio in October with an update in May. So if you'd like me to present at those 2 points in time, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, we don't need it in paper, and just have access to it online.
Okay.
I would like to see that one-page sheet that
One-page sheet.
shows just kind of that update.
Okay, and I will just bring that as after I send it in at that time.
And then you'll give us, in the spirit of transparency to our public community, you'll provide us with an update at a board meeting?
Certainly, I could do that. I take it you want something less than the 3 hours I spent in.
Just a quick blurb, just an update.
You know, once you get me talking about that, we tend to run long. I'll try to make it as short as possible and get that to you.
You think part of the reason why our cash balance became higher this time is because of delinquent property taxes that have been collected over the past year?
That's certainly one of the reasons. You know, it's just amazing, and I keep telling Dr. Klein for 9 years, everything that could go wrong did. Everything was negative, and now all of a sudden everything is positive. You name it, it's up. TIF revenues are up.
Knock on wood.
TIF revenues are up. Our staff has made these concessions. Expenditures are down. I almost don't know how to act bringing you good news after 9 years of.
Don't look at it too happy, because we're due for some hyperinflation to hit the way they've been borrowing money at the federal level.
That's,
And some of the major experts in the field of, we're within 3 to 9 months of a major blow up.
But to your point, it sounds like it's a group effort of conservatives.
it is, and you know, I will, within the next month or so, we'll be putting a list together. It's just unbelievable to me the number of one-time revenues we have gotten this year. If you remember, starting way back in July, we got $162,000 from the Bureau of Workers' Comp. Every so often, and the last time was 10 years ago in 2004, before I came here, they take a look at their reserves, and if they have more cash on hand than they need, they send you a rebate. We got that rebate. We have been working on our Medicaid revenues since the time I got here, negotiating with the state. They've been sending us about $150,000 a year in revenues, but it's been a negotiation between a consortium that we're in, that accountant, and the state as to who should be paid that money, the Department of Human Services or the schools who are performing tasks that Medicaid was meant to pay for. Kind of been in negotiations. We got a settlement in January. Well, I got the notification the end of January, just got the revenues a month or two ago, $431,000. And there's a couple others that are escaping me at the moment, but I'm going to make a list and bring to you. Dr. Klein and I were talking. It adds up to almost $1 million of one-time revenues that were just odd things we've been working on. You know, we kept filing those Medicaid reports, hoping that something would come of it one day. Catastrophic aid, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get those revenues in this year as the state moved the filing deadline, and the filing deadline is, I think, not till the 16th. We already filed ours. We filed early. I think the deadline's not till the 16th, though. So it's unlikely that we'll get the catastrophic revenues from this year. But the state increased the funding pot for that by 44%. Now more school districts will probably apply for it, and we won't know how much we're going to get until we get it. But as I say, it's let's keep our fingers crossed. Almost too good to be true.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay. Superintendent's business, facilities master plan.
Thank you. At this point, as we discussed earlier on our board calendar for the rest of the school year, we were going to start our conversations around the work of the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. Mrs. Cropper, Mr. Dyer, myself met with representatives from the OFCC, I believe it was a week or so ago, shared that information with Mr. Waldman as part of the Facilities Committee. Mr. Merchant was out of town, so we shared that information with Mr. Waldman last week. And we do want to present some information to you this evening about the findings that they have come forward with. That will focus on, tonight we'll focus on the assessments that they came in and did as they went through all of our buildings and assessed where we are as far as replacements or reconditioning or renovating, those types of things. And then we'll talk a little bit more after Mr. Dyer shares that information with you. We'll talk a little bit more about next steps, because after our conversations, that has changed a bit as far as the next steps involved with that process. So at this point, I'd welcome Mr. Dyer to come forward and share information about the assessments that have been completed by the OFCC.
I want to tell Mrs. Crawford my stack is bigger than hers.
That is.
Just for a reference point, this is the facility assessment, and you have one of those in front of you this evening. There is an assessment packet for each individual school, with the exception of Amelia Elementary and Withamsville. Needless to say, they don't need any improvements since they are new buildings, and the state's already co-funded them through the ELP program. We haven't received any money, but they already have approved those through the ELP. But anyway, I'm not going to go through all these. Nobody. But what I wanted to do this evening is just take a few minutes to go over the assessment, because it is a critical piece. There's two pieces that really drive the master plan, and that's the enrollment projections as well as the assessments of our current buildings. Those two factors are very critical as you head into master planning. because that drives everything. That drives square footage, that drives whether we renovate, whether we build new, it drives all of those issues. So if we could, I think we have a PowerPoint. I have just a few slides that I wanted to go over. And what I did this evening is I just picked Summerside for no reason, but I just picked Summerside. I think it was our highest rated, but I just as a reference point, because you have that, and just kind of explain just a few details about the assessment as you go through it. What we'd like to do is we'd like for you to go through the assessment. I understand it's a lot of paperwork, and if there's errors, omissions, things that you don't agree with, if you could get those back to us, we can send them back to the assessing company to have those reevaluated, because we want that to be factual and actual. This is a group of folks that is hired by the Ohio School Facilities Commission, and I'm going to say that wrong all evening because I'm used to working through them, but it's now the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. But through Million and Withamsville Construction, they were Ohio School Facilities Commission before they changed their name. So I'll probably say that wrong all evening, so just ignore that, and it is really now the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. But so anyway, I'd like to get any comments that you may have, and we'll work our way through that. The first slide I have here this evening is what you'll see on each one of these. This is just kind of a short explanation of what the school itself. As you see Summerside, it tells you what the current enrollment is, and that's going to be as of probably the October count is what they use for that. You'll see the acreage, you'll see K through 5, the number of teaching stations, etc. That's just general information. That's going to be for every school. If you go to the next slide. And then the next page you'll see is just some pictures and just a brief general description and a little narrative at the bottom. I'm not going to read that to you, but they kind of explain the school as they saw it, and it's just a narrative of that. It tells the square footage, the building dates, and et cetera. If you go to the next slide. I'm going to go through these pretty quick till I get to the next one. And then here you'll see in all of these what they were being able to pull out as additions. And that's critical as we have a further conversation here, because they do assess each one of those additions separately. They do them combined and they do it separately. So that's when the additions they were able to identify anyway. And next slide. Okay, and it gets to this. This is page 7, I believe, in every assessment. This is an overview of the assessment of each individual school. Like I said, we've got Summerside here. And what they do in this particular sheet, this is probably the most condensed telling sheet of each one. And this is where they go through, and again, they label the grades, the additions. They get the current square footage of the additions. And then at the bottom, about halfway down on the left side, to the bottom, that's where they really start their assessment of the building. They have a team come through, and they go through each individual building. They don't ask a lot from us. They just want us to open doors, and they go through, and it's they have a rating sheet. They go through and rate each individual building, and then they put a dollar figure to what it takes to renovate those schools. And if you see that the first one is the heating system. If you go back through I didn't put them up there, but if you go back through the assessment report you have in front of you, there's a section for each one of these. If you look at the heating system for Summerside, you'll see exactly what they were talking about. They're looking at unit ventilators, or you're looking at no air conditioning. They're looking at the age of the boilers, the type of boiler system, and those type things. So in this particular building, they have a figure of 1.750 to 1,750,000 plus to bring the heating system up to the Ohio School Design Manual's schedule. And what they have at the state level, they have a manual. It's about 6 inches thick, and they update it on a regular basis. And it's been developed with a team of engineers and people across the state that says, this is what we think our schools should have in them. And so in order to get state funding, you need to meet the guidelines of the Ohio School Design Manual, OSDM they call it. You'll see that referred in there. I didn't want to quote that wrong. And so the assessment, they look at the heating system, they look at the roofing, they look at the ventilation, air conditioning, the electrical systems, plumbing, fixtures, windows, foundations, structures, chimneys, general finishes. In the general finishes is typically your like paint, ceilings, those type things, and just the overall general finishes. And then lighting, security systems, emergency egress, fire alarms, handicap accessibility, the site condition, sewage system, water supply, exterior doors, hazardous material, which in most cases you're going to see in all of these reports is going to be asbestos. And we don't have, I don't believe I saw any other hazardous items pop up there, but asbestos is listed as hazardous material. And life safety, loose furnishings, which is your furniture, and then technology. And then they have construction contingencies. As you can see in Summerside, they have a $9,593,000 plus is what they, a factor and a price they put to renovate Summerside Elementary to make it up to the high school design manual specifications. Yes?
3's bad or 3's good? What's the rating scale? You got ratings 1 to 3.
3 is bad.
3's bad.
3 is bad, 1 is good.
We have air conditioning in there, or?
No.
But they've got a 1 on air conditioning.
Some of that falls under, like where you get to the air conditioning, that's probably ventilation because they couple that under the heating system. If you go back and look at this, not in every building. If we had air conditioning, they'd rate it separately, but they have, in this particular case, they have a complete renovation of the heating system to include air conditioning because the building is not air conditioned. And so that's where it would fall in there.
How high does the rating scale go?
1 to 3, I believe.
Just 1 to 3?
I believe so.
Yes.
Yes. And they've got a rating right in the middle there between the price and the
Gotcha.
scope. And then if you look up in the upper right-hand side, that's more of a subjective. The assessors, they ask them, they have a sheet they fill out as they're doing their assessment individually of what they think of what they saw. This is real objective over here. They look at the site. It's like, is it a good site for a school? There may be some of our locations where you'll see that number will be higher, some will be lower. Some sites, they may not think it was a great site at all. You can make all the improvements that you want. It may still not be a good site for a school. And then they look at the structural, mechanical features and things like that. Is the foundation cracked? Those kinds of things. What do they think? And then the plant maintainability, as well as the building safety and security. Educational adequacy. Is it how does it flow? That's a big one. It's like, is it easy for the students to flow? Is it easy to manage? Can you walk out of the office and see all the classrooms, and how does it function? And so they ask them to put their own, in an environment for education, I may have said that, but they ask them to put a rating to that. And so they rate that in addition to what's happening on the left-hand side. And then they get a dollar figure for the assessment, and that's for every building. I wanted to go back just a little bit, and then if you go to the next sheets, you'll see each one of these additions broke out separately, so it can get a little confusing, or it can for me anyway. And you'll see the next assessment, you'll have a sheet just like this for the 1951 original, and then you'll be the 1956 classroom edition. So they have each one of these broke out individually as well as a combined. And the reason they do that, because there could be a case, and Glen Estee High School is one of them, where a portion of the building, they are recommending that it would be renovated and abandoned, as well as the rest of it, they would recommend it be renovated. Because just the gym wing there, which used to be the auto body, auto mechanic shop, and et cetera, they think in their assessment that doesn't make a good educational environment. The spacers are too big, you got drains in the floors, and to bring that up to classroom quality to meet the Ohio School Design Manual, it would take more than it would to build new. So in that particular case, and that's why they do it individually. For that wing, they would say you need to abandon. For the rest of the school, they would have it renovate. So it's, I think that's the only one we see that, but that's why they do them individually. And individual wings additions may have separate assessments, especially if you get into a building that has an addition was built more recent than the original. And so we have different assessments for those. I wanted to kind of go over that as you look through them. I'd like for you, if you would, take the time to look through those, at least scan through those. If you see anything that just grabs you as, man, how could that be? How could that wing be that? Or how do they think the electrical system can be that bad? If we don't have the answer, we'll get the answer from the assessment team. I don't know if there's any questions on the assessment itself. Like I said, I only did one school, but as far as just explaining this, it'd take us till tomorrow to go through all these sheets. But the folks from the Ohio School Facilities Commission, as well as Resource International, which is their contractor to work with us on the master plan, they are more than willing. They didn't come this evening because you're just getting the information. They're more than willing to come to a board meeting and address any concerns you may have. I'm not their spokesperson, but I am standing here this evening to present it to you in the best I can. And here is the facility assessment. We'll go through it, and then any concerns, if we need to bring them, they'll be here. They have no problem with coming to a board meeting.
And on the right-hand column, in the middle, but right near the end of the lines, there's a renovation cost factor with a percentage and
yes,
the cost to renovate. Could you speak to that cost factor?
I just know enough to be dangerous about that, but I will speak to it.
Yep.
Before I go to that, if I could, one of the things I forgot to mention is when you get up to the, in the right column, they also put a category what they rated the building, each one of those, not only just a percentage, satisfactory, poor, borderline, etc. And as you can see in Summerside, it's rated as a borderline school. But that factor is 98.12% of the column over here on the left at the bottom, and it is a ratio that they have for the master plan. And it's a complicated formula, as they tell me. I don't know, you might know more about it than I do, how they really drive that, but the number on the right is the one that shows up in the master plan, but it's a formula that's in every school. It's a formula that they've established for West Claremont. 98.12 is of this number is what they use in the master plan to decide if it's an adequate building. I don't know if I explained it well. I just know enough to be dangerous.
Does that mean I don't know. I'm just looking at it and guessing it, but does that mean that with 98% to renovate versus replacement, or
no,
nothing
it
to do
doesn't
with
mean that.
replacement?
And that's a good question. And I'm going to go over that in another slide here. My next slide will be that. But in the assessment themselves, they don't put a renovate. The assessment is just the assessment. It's the company come through and assess. They put a dollar figure. When they now go into the master planning phase of it, they take the dollar figure from the assessment firm and they equate it to what it would cost to build a new building with the same square footage as you're seeing here, and up to the design manual specifications, and then they put a ratio to that. And that will show up in the master planning phase. I have gained some of that preliminary knowledge from them. I put it on a slide. I will print that out and get it to you. And if you would go to my next slide, have a blank in there.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Oh, there it
And
is.
it sort of fits. But this is what they will be showing in the master plan as the replacement renovation ratio. As you can see, the schools are on the left, and then in the middle is our ratio, and then what they are recommending as our scope of work on the right-hand side. And as you can see, Summerside we're talking about is an 80%. They would recommend, and their formula is anything over 66%, you should consider to demo and abandon the building versus renovating it. Now, there are exceptions for that. You can ask for exceptions. They first started out with no exceptions because you may be in a historical site or like some of the inner city schools. You have no choice in some particular cases, or the community just wouldn't stand for you tearing down a school or doing. So there's always, you can go back and ask for a waiver on that. But their recommendation as it stands, and it's where we will start in the master planning phase, is with this being the renovation, replacement percentage, and the scope of work.
So what
That-
you're saying is that 9 of our 12 buildings are above the threshold
Yes.
of what they would recommend for us to
Abs-
demolish versus renovate?
Absolutely. The only one they would not recommend, that falls below is Holly Hill. All the rest are above the percentage. They, and so it opens up a whole world of discussions and comments, and it's one of the things we'll need to work through is when we go into the master planning phase, do we address all of those? Do we address portions of those? Or do we go back and try to get some of them waivers? Do we not address any? And the master planning is endless, the options that may be out there that we could explore in that phase. Like I said, before we get too deep into that, and that's something we won't get in at all tonight, but we want to make sure our assessment is correct. If we disagree with these numbers, we think they should be higher, lower, that's what we want to take back to them. We're at that phase now. Let's look at this and say, how in the world could that be? And send that message back to the assessment team and let them walk through and tell us, or take another look at it if they need to.
One of the questions I had looking at all of these reports just briefly on the summary there, it looks like the structural and mechanical features are listed as poor, but then on the left-hand side, they're given 1s and 2s. Well, if they're 1s and 2s, you wouldn't expect them to be considered poor.
Well, it may not be poor as far as in an objective state, but just take for instance, I think Marwin was one of those as I looked at. The site, I mean, it's a good site, but it's rated poor. The people walking through it thought it was a horrible site for a school because of the way it's built. There's not enough room to separate the car and
But I'm
drop off
specifically
traffic.
talking about the structure and mechanical features.
Well, and
then looking over here to the left where it says structure foundation, structure walls and chimney, structure floors and roofs. If those are 1s and 2s, how did they get to the structure and mechanical features being poor?
it's just a person's opinion. On their right-hand side is their opinion of it.
Well, I think with respect to those particular issues, they can be satisfactory in terms of their current functionality, but they could be at the end of their lifespan as well. And there's typically a lifespan associated with HVAC equipment. And so if it's passed or exceeded that, while it could be functioning properly today, it's going to be recommended as a part of an upgrade. So you may see one thing that says it one way, but there's still a significant cost to it because part of this whole process is bringing those buildings up to current standards. Right. And in many cases, the buildings, the HVAC just does not adequately support, or it doesn't have air conditioning, and so that has to be a part of that process.
And I would imagine the heating, I would assume the heating, roofing, and electrical systems and plumbing are all in part of that structure and mechanical features, and they're rated at 3. So
Yeah, those
the structures all look good, but the mechanical stuff involved with it doesn't.
Yep. And you could have the same thing going on with the roofs where they're not necessarily leaking, but they've exceeded their lifespan and they need to be either totally replaced or restored. And so they've allocated dollars to deal with that. And that's why you see a little bit of that rating discrepancy and why sometimes it doesn't look like it should, but it's because of the way those,
Probably a good
the way
example.
they allocate the dollars to it.
Probably a good example of that, as I'm thinking, is if you take let's just pick Summerside, for instance. The outside of the building structurally is good shape, but if you look at it with the windows covered up and all that stucco, it's probably poor in that guy's eyes. While it may be solid and firm, it's not really a good structure when you talk about school. So you could get some of that type thing going on, where a guy looks at that and say, it's great shape, but ooh.
There's a double pane, single pane windows on Summerside.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Single pane?
They are, yes.
There's your answer right there.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So they work, but
They work, but
they
they're not
don't
good.
fit in terms of the standards.
So, like I said, they do their very objective. They got strict guidelines. They have to meet those on the left-hand side. It needs to meet this. It's rated, and then they get, okay, we're going to allow you to give a weighting factor to it over here on the right-hand side. What do you think? You've just walked through this whole building. You know, in addition to all of this that fits the manual, what are your thoughts? And that's where you get, you know, a building could be in great shape, but we think it's a horrible building for a school. And I don't know that we have any of those, but we'll see a real low rating. I just don't like the way it's laid out or don't like a particular thing. So I hope that helps.
Well, the one question I have, just looking at the front page on all of them, we just got the audit from the state back in December that said every one of our buildings were underutilized. With the high school, Glen Estee High School, 58%, and other than, I think Brantner was the only one that was right around 100, but everything else was usually like in the 70s, maybe the 80% utilized for students.
Sure.
And then every one of these is showing like, you know, the enrollment's way over capacity. It's like, how, it's totally, you know, I'm looking at Glen Estee Middle is 50% over capacity, and Amelia High School is more than double capacity. It's like, and Amelia High School, where the state was like 68, 72%, somewhere there. How are those, I mean, that's really.
Sure.
Yep,
We,
we had that same
Right.
discussion with them.
It,
With
yeah.
yes, they use different standards. We had that same discussion.
Yes.
It is why they measure based on square footage per classroom for the new Ohio Facilities Construction Commission.
Oh, there you go.
And those standards are different than what someone else may be working with.
Sure.
Because they may take into consideration an art room, a library,
Yep.
the PE.
All of those things come into play when they do that.
That's the square footage.
And it's clearly different today than it was when these buildings were built. And that's why you see that discrepancy.
And you look at that, and if you were to go back and look at our old master plan, our old assessment, they were recommending additions on all of these buildings. Pretty much every building we had. With our decline of enrollment, we've said all of those, in most of the buildings, we still have some listed on some of these, but most of the buildings, the additions have gone away just by the drop in enrollment. But prior to the prior master plan was, yeah, we had additions on all the elementaries. But we're seeing that. And in this assessment, anytime we're available for funding, let's just say we were to establish a master plan and we were available for funding, and we only did a portion of that, which we could just pick one school, two schools, or a portion. Then anytime we'd come back up for another portion, they would do a whole new assessment all over again and assess that just to see what has changed, as well as on a regular basis, they look at the enrollment projections and those kinds of things to make sure. Now, it doesn't change during the program. I mean, if you started and said, we're going to, you know, abate Brantner and move forward, if it changed while you're in the middle of it, nothing changes here. It's when you start the program that they look at that. So kind of the process is we have, there's a little bit, and I don't want to get into what Dr. Klein may talk about here in a little bit, but there's 150 districts on the priority list right now. We were available to start working with us. We were high enough on the priority list that they wanted to start working with us in 2012. We deferred at that point because we just weren't ready to even start considering a master plan, et cetera. They notified us again in 2013, near the end of the year, to say, we think there may be funding for West Claremont in 2014. And so we started, okay, let's do we okayed them doing the assessment and the enrollment projections. And part of the reason meeting with us last week is they wanted to come and tell us that they don't think we're going to be available for funding this year. They're almost 100%, but not quite there. There's 150 districts. 40 of those will be moved forward. They'll more than likely do 40 schools this year out of those 150. There's 10 of those that are lapsed district, which were available for funding, weren't able to raise their portion and fell off the list. And so for them, they've got to raise their money and then they will provide matching the money, but the district has to raise their money first. So there's 10 of those on the ballot in May that could move forward and get funding. So it looks like we're not going to be available for funding until 2015, but it's a pretty tight time frame when we get there. they start working with us, if we could start working on the master plan throughout this year, they'll start coming to the board around the first of the year, January, February, but they want board approval in May, and then they decide in July whether we're going to be funded or not. But if they think it's a reality, then they will come to us, like I said, in the first part of the year. So there's not a lot of time at that point to start working through a master plan. So it makes some sense, and I'll let Dr. Klein deal with the timelines for that. It makes some sense to start working through that as we head toward next year, so we're prepared to take advantage of or decline funding. It could be whatever the board prefers. It comes down to that. We do have a credit out there of around $9 million that is from the building of the 2 new schools. And the state funds those at 30%, and the local is 70%. So there is a credit out there of about $9 million, give or take a little bit, that is available if we accept funding. We could do a segmented portion of this or et cetera to take advantage of those funding, but that's something will need to be discussed in the master planning phase. And questions?
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
The community did not appreciate a couple years ago when we tried to pass a bond for 4 new elementary schools and an athletic complex. They were very gracious and generous to support the building of 2 elementary schools. They're going to have a heart attack when they hear and see that 9 of our buildings have now reached the point of needing, or recommendation of needing to be replaced versus renovated. That's just unbelievable that we've reached that.
I think it speaks volumes about the amount of work that the board alone is going to have to deal with if we're going to even try to tackle this. And that's an early decision that I think we all need to make as to whether we want to pursue that. And I think certainly some recommendations from Dr. Klein are going to be helpful in that process, but there's a huge amount of work to do related to this.
Well, I think it goes a step further when the state recommended a couple years ago that we recommend replacing these 2 buildings. We had that kind of in front of us as to what the recommendation is. Now you've got 9 buildings and very little money to do it with. And what I don't want to see us go in one direction of supporting one side of the district versus the other, or one demographic of children versus the other, and that's going to be very tough to balance it all and make it good for everybody.
Yeah, there's some major decisions. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's when you look at that, I mean, it's easy to look at that and say, oh, that's good, but it really is a ton of work behind that. Yep. When you start looking at that, and is it feasible, and what is feasible and what's not feasible, and like you said, the equity piece versus do you take care of the greatest need, or what do you do?
You can't invest in something that is just not worthy of investment. I mean, I think that's where the bottom line is. Sometimes you have to replace your car because you've put so much money into it. What else is going to go wrong with it? You have to make that commitment.
Well, it's not cost effective to continue to plunk money into it.
Exactly.
They see that also, and that's why the rating, and as our buildings continue to get older, I'm assuming the next time we have an assessment, that we'll see those ratings even climb more.
Yep.
Because as the buildings decline, it's not that our buildings are dirty or not structurally sound. It's just that we're falling behind in what the rest of the state's doing and what's recommended for school buildings for children. What they should be accessible to and what is available to them facility-wise. And so...
At that same point, my second comment I wanted to make was I'm very disheartened by our beloved Brantner reaching a very inadequate recommendation or category on the educational adequacy of that building. Mm-hmm. That is so disheartening. I mean, of all things.
I agree.
The educational adequacy. That's what we're in business for.
Absolutely.
It speaks to the amount of work that this board is going to have to try to tackle. And whether up front, whether the heart's there to do it. There's that much to engage here. And I think it's going to be important to get input from Dr. Klein on how we move forward with this.
Well, we have been doing some preliminary talking about that timeline, and I know that because the state, until we met with them just recently, we were still under the belief that that money could be flowing from the state as early as this spring. And so as you know, in looking and lining up our meetings and having discussions, incredibly tight timeline in order for us to make those decisions. So in some regards, I'm a little bit relieved because we have more time to do and have serious conversations about the direction of the district. So our intent right now, as we move forward, is we wanted to share the assessment piece because we all are, as the central office team, and we need board members to take a look at the assessments that have been done and raise questions. If there are questions, the first step is getting those cleared up and seeing if the OFCC folks will make modifications on any of this. So that's step one. Step two is really to sit down and look at options that we have available to us as far as, do we look at replacing one elementary? Do we look at consolidating two and building one? Do we look at high schools? What do we look at? And so we will, over the course of the summer, work with the OFCC folks to come up with various options as starting points for our discussions. I don't think it's good for us to just go with a blank slate. We need to have some options that we can debate and talk about and figure out where we are and what we'd like to do some more work on. I anticipate coming back with that information close to the beginning of the new school year, so this August. The fall, to do this right, we really need to be engaging our community in what they'd like to see prior to making a final decision. So by bringing this back in August or beginning of the school year, beginning of September, we will be able to have those conversations amongst the board in public session, and then we'll be able to take some of those options out and share them with our community. And I see us having a series of community forums to get feedback on various plans that exist. As Mr. Dyer indicated, they're going to be wanting, they being OFCC, are going to be wanting in January, right after the first of the year, to finalize the district's master plan. And by that point, we will have been able to go through all of it. We'll have feedback from the community and hopefully be able to zero down on some plans or a plan that we can move forward with. As Mr. Dyer mentioned as well, the timeline towards the end of that cycle will be this time of year next year when the state will want a commitment from us as to whether we want to take money if it's available from the state and how are we going to finance the project as a whole. So while I guess in some regards I'm relieved that we've got more time to be able to work through this in a very deliberate way, they are decisions, if you look at those ratings, they are decisions that we need to make for the future of this district. And so, like I said, the next immediate step is to really take a look at the assessments that have been provided us and ask the kind of questions you were asking tonight. Quite honestly, that's why we spent some paper on getting you hard copies, because we want you to be able to mark them up and circle and do those kinds of things, and then get that feedback to us so that we can raise those questions with the folks from OFCC. So good news is we're not on quite the fast track that we had planned to be on this spring because the funding's not available. It does give us a little bit of breathing room to be very deliberate about our conversations and decision-making process. So that's kind of how I see it lying out, at least on the surface at this point. Certainly we'll be adding detail to that plan as we move forward. I don't know if there are questions, feedback about that outline at this point.
Well, one thing is, I mean, the state auditor said we could probably close one of our elementaries. So one less building to replace, possibly. I'm not too sure until we look better at what we're doing in the future that we want to build new buildings under the old agrarian sit in the classroom type of thing, because that's not working today. And we can go out and show you the charter schools where they don't do the sitting in the classroom with a teacher lecturing that are excelling. And, you know, the standard classroom may be not what we want to build and then be stuck with it for the next however long. I mean, the virtual classroom is probably more closer to what the future is going to be than what we're seeing in 99% of our classes today. And, you know, we want to build these classrooms that are set for a teacher and 25, 30 students in a lecture type of place when we need the technology and the ability for them to break up into groups and to have their own workstations and learn at their own pace and achieve instead of, what they're doing to now. And then we have to fight with the state with, I'm sorry, everybody's not college material. And the OGT, I'm sorry, I don't think that tells us a whole hell of a lot as far as what we really need to know on how these students are. And the Josh Mandel article in the Wall Street Journal recently is we need shop back in the classroom because we've got our vocational schools, but instead of gearing these kids to be going to college and getting a degree in naval contemplation or whatever it is that ends up they work in a Starbucks with $50,000 debt when they graduate, it's not where we want to be pushing our kids. I mean, welders make a hell of a lot more money than a teacher does. A good welder can make, $100,000 a year, and not everybody's able to sit in the classroom and be educated. So I'm leery of just saying, let's go, they say to build we need 9 schools replaced at some point.
Well,
do we really want, we can't, the community can't afford that, one. And
Absolutely.
two, do we want to go back and build one of these Taj Mahals that reflect today's standards that are going to be woefully adequate for what we're looking at in 10 years?
Well, and quite honestly, those decisions would be part of a design conversation that we would have well after we've had an opportunity to look at master plans and what makes sense for the district. Certainly, I don't think anybody in the administrative team believes that we could tackle that entire plan, and the community would be able to support that in any form or fashion. When you're looking at that many buildings, we've got to make decisions around priorities and what needs to be done immediately and what maybe we can put off until the next master plan is developed down the road. That being said, we certainly don't want to put up buildings that aren't responsive to the instructional needs and where we are as far as academics are concerned moving forward. That would come, as I said, in the design phase, which would be well into the future. Now, we've avoided, because we wanted to see this work, obviously these folks have come in and this is what they do, and they gave us a pretty good handle on where all of our buildings stand at this point. But we have been putting off a conversation around consolidation of schools for a couple reasons. Number one, it's about an 18-month process to be able to close a school and make adjustments. And it's not as simple as closing one and moving all those kids to another school. It's a ripple effect that would impact every elementary school, as an example, in this district. That being said, we're waiting for this plan to see kind of where that stands, and I think we need to come up with a master plan that makes sense. I think it's also in our students' best interest to avoid, if we can, having them move to different buildings over the course of their years in elementary school. It doesn't serve a child well to spend 2 years in one elementary, 2 years in another, and 2 years in another, because we keep shifting enrollment lines. And so I think that we've got to continue through this process and see what makes sense, where the cost savings can take place, and make good judicious decisions that are not going to have kids hopping from one building to another over the course of their career. And I agree with you, Mr. Lewis, we've got to make sure that our schools any school that we would build, if we choose to do that, would be fitted so that it would be able to move us into the future. Because as we all know, education is changing.
The two new buildings, are those 30-year?
I'm sorry?
Are those 30-year mortgages on those two
Yes.
buildings? So we're paying those for another 30 years or another
Yes.
28 or whatever?
Yes.
Yes.
Buildings there for a long time, and it's hard to project. Sometimes it's hard to project what's going to happen 20, 30 years out there. Like I said, education as it looks today is probably going to be much different. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, it's going to be probably scary if we knew what it really was going to look like out there. So we just work through the best we can, what knowledge we have, and work through those. One of the things I will tell you.
Before you go on, Mr. Dyer, I did want to make one point. Yeah, you're correct that the bonds issued for the buildings are over a 30-year time period, but after we issued those bonds, there was a law change. so that actually they allow you to finance major building projects like this over 40 years to help with the cost and lower the taxes to the community. But that wasn't an option that was available to us at that time. The law changed afterwards. Sorry, Mr. Dyer.
No, that's fine.
Make that point.
And we don't expect to get rid of these buildings in 30, 40 years. They'll be there for a long time. That's the expectations, as these have. Some of these have been here a long time. Anyway, any more questions, concerns? Stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
you're
Dyer.
welcome.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
A lot of work.
Please, I don't want to forget to please, it is very important if you have comments and et cetera. There is no bad question, there is no bad comment. Anything on these assessments, get it to us so we can get it evaluated and we can get these as factual and actual as we can so that we're dealing with good information. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. Yes, under personnel tonight, we have accepted on behalf of the board several resignations. I'd like to draw your attention to two in particular. Mimi Leidenberger, elementary teacher at Clough Pike. She is retiring with 40 years of teaching service, 25 of which has been with our district. Also like to bring your attention to Linda Gray. Linda's been a preschool teacher at Clough Pike as well. She's retiring after 42 years of teaching experience, 22 of which have been with West Claremont. Under personnel agenda information, we do have 2 certified personnel teachers that we are looking to employ for next school year. We also have a couple of supplemental contracts that need approval. Some of those are for the remainder of this year, home tutors that we use on an as-needed basis, and some supplementals for next school year as well. Under letter D, we have a significant list of volunteers, and we do appreciate them stepping up to help in our buildings as they do throughout the entire school year. The last item is our stipend approvals. Those are 3 of our teachers who have served as mentors for students from Northern Kentucky University. That money comes through from Northern Kentucky. We turn it around and pay it out to our employees who have been serving in that role. With that being said, I'd like to respectfully request that the board approve the personnel agenda as presented.
You've heard the recommendation from Dr. Klein. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
Yes.
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Merchant.
Yes.
Superintendent's comments, Dr. Klein?
I have a few items to mention this evening. I'll try to keep it brief. I did have the opportunity to meet with about 40 realtors this morning. We had a very good session with them, shared with them the progress that the district's been making around getting our financial situation under control. Also talked about with them the opportunities that we're looking at adding back for students as far as academic programming is concerned for next school year. They were very receptive to the information and left very positive around West Claremont. And I think realtors obviously have a vested interest in the health and welfare of a school district, because we know that that's a major attracting point for citizens who are looking for a place to raise their children. And certainly reaching out to them, I think, was a positive today. We were able to give them a lot of information. They asked some great questions. And we're going to continue to do those kinds of things as we move forward. That was pretty much Sibsey Klein today, both Anderson and this area. We're going to continue to reach out to those folks so that we can share the positive news about what's going on in West Claremont. So I wanted to share that with you. We're also pursuing right now opportunities for summer school and making that a virtual program for our students. We're still working through that at this point. What I would say about it is that we are looking at a 3-week summer school period during the month of June. Gives kids an opportunity to make up courses maybe they didn't pass this past school year or do some advanced credit work. Our intent is to have all of any expenses that would be attached to that, and of course there'll be a staff issue with as far as monitoring and those kinds of things. But we anticipate that any cost with that will be offset easily by the tuition that we would charge for those makeup courses. As a matter of fact, I think that we probably will end up seeing over the course of the summer additional revenues coming to the district by putting this program into place. So I just wanted to share that with you. I can give you a little bit more of an update. I want to make sure that you are aware of it as we move forward. We're working on that because the end of the school year is coming really, really soon. We're almost there.
You know, Dr. Klein, I
Yeah.
struggle with the idea or the concept, and I'm not against it.
Right.
I struggle with it, that it's a 3-week course, and a child could take that to make up a class that they did not pass, which they sat 9 months in. How do you recover a 9-month failure in 3 weeks?
Well, number one, the student has typically, the student's already done the seat time, which is how we still, like it or not, has how those credits are still awarded. So they've already done the seat time. By doing the makeup work virtually, they're recovering information that they probably already had and maybe chose not to do. Maybe they didn't do the homework or they didn't do well on tests. What we know is kids typically, we have a population of kids who respond well to online learning and going at their own pace. I'm still committed to, and I think it's an important piece of success with those kind of programs, that we have an adult overseeing their progress and communicating with parents to make sure the coursework gets done. So I agree with you. There's some disconnect there, but the kids, and most of these kids have already sat through the class, maybe didn't do well on tests or whatever, and this gives us an opportunity to make that up. The downside, if we didn't do something like this, and I don't think we can afford a full-blown summer school, this gives us the opportunity to offer kids courses in a variety of subject areas that can be monitored and completed over the course of that time frame. And it also allows kids who were not successful to make some of those credits up so that they can stay on track for graduation, be able to graduate with their peer group. Any other questions?
Would that be also available for those that should have graduated that don't have enough credits to meet that last credit? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
two?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they should have graduated this year, but they're
Maybe they messed
one
up.
or two courses shy.
Messed up a half a credit somewhere and they didn't meet the requirements. So that would give them an opportunity to finish that and be a graduate with a class of 2014.
What about a child that wants to do something constructive with their summer and take a class proactively? Let's say that they're a 4.0 student
Right.
and they want to take a whatever. Would that be available
That's
to
an
them
option as well. Yeah. And again, it's giving parents and kids options. And certainly want to keep kids on track so that they can graduate with their original class. That's important. I did want to give you an update with the changes that we've had in the master plan development and the work from OFCC. We are working on adjusting our schedule with board meetings and what we're going to be talking about. So I'm putting the final touches on that, and I'll certainly share that hopefully by the end of this week so that everybody knows where we're at. We did have some conversations with daycares over the last couple of weeks around K+ and extended day. In some cases, quite honestly, the major argument two major arguments for moving forward. The enrollment in those programs have demonstrated to us that those are programs that parents want and need to help. Secondarily, as I explained, and Mrs. Cropper sat in on one of the meetings with me, as I've explained to folks, we are right now as a district trying to keep our students with us. And we know that outflow takes revenue from our district and sends it to other places. And so we are, in a sense, in West Claremont, fighting to keep our kids and be competitive with other options that folks have out there. And so this gives us some good leverage with that. It's meeting the needs of our parents. We've got to be good. We've got to be good so that our customers are pleased with what product we're offering them, and this fits right into that mold. And as I've said before, and I said to realtors today, we know that probably one of the number one factors in real estate sales is the quality of the school district. And so we've got to continue to move forward with improving what we offer kids, what our options and opportunities are for them. We want folks to make West Claremont, or want folks to see West Claremont as being a district of choice. So this falls right into that. As I didn't get enrollment numbers updates today, but the numbers continue to climb. And we expect that we'll have even more kids come August when it dawns on some folks they need to get their child registered for kindergarten. That's always a battle that we fight. So we're moving forward with that, and I'll try to at the next board meeting give you an update on numbers so that you know where we stand. That's all I have for superintendent's comments.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Public comments, speaking to the board? All right. Board business, board comments. Anyone?
we need to, Mrs. Cropper, how, I would assume that you basically have form letters set up to go for RFPs. It wouldn't take you too long to put one out, right?
We don't currently have form letters, but it certainly would be an easy thing to do. We have actually, I've been here in the past when we have interviewed firms, and so I could dig that stuff out. I think that as an administration, and with the two board members that I'm struggling to remember, but the two board members that you had wanted to also set on any type of vetting process, I'm sure we could all get together and design a process. We do have sample RFPs. One of the nice things about working in the school district industry is we can send out an email, and we have a multitude of school districts who have done this and will share with us their information and how they did it. And that's one of the things I love about the school business. So it would be something that we could work together from it. I don't know if Dr. Klein has something to add. I know that he has a time frame and has been working on this, so.
We are, and I've asked Ms. Sanborn and Mr. Waldman, who are the two board reps on this committee, to send me some dates. So we're collecting dates right now from the board members as well as our district office team who will be a part of that. We do have I do have one RFP that I have a sample of, and are working through doing some edits and reading through that and updating it so that we can send that out as quickly as we can. As I mentioned to Ms. Sanborn and Mr. Merchant in the agenda setting meetings, we really are at this point slammed with trying to get through the end of the school year. And so we're looking at June to be able to complete this process. And my goal is by the end of June to be able to come back with that committee's recommendations to the board. But we are right now, it's tough for us to have cabinet meetings right now because everybody is so incredibly busy, let alone finding a full day for us to interview legal firms.
You know, and while I think that that's very important that and I agree with the need to vet the process, I'd like to put a motion on the floor to recommend that we delay this process to get you through the end of the school year. I think it's important that our administrative staff has that time to focus on the children and getting us through graduation, and delay the vetting process until June.
But I'd like to see us start the vetting process in early June, not the end of June.
So do we have a motion now?
We do have a
that
motion.
We have to,
A motion.
we need a second on?
Need a second, then you can discuss.
I'll second it.
I'm not inclined to wait till the end of June. I think we need, for the sake of the community and the children, we need to replace the firms we have right now, and I would like to see something done around the vetting process to take place in early June, not late June.
I guess for me personally, I'd like to better understand what you believe the issues are associated with the need for new legal counsel. In the conversations that I've had with Dr. Klein, regarding any concerns that he has with our existing legal counsel or his administrators that utilize the district's legal counsel, there are no issues that they're bringing up. So before I make my own decision on what I'm going to do, I'd like to really understand from you, Jim, where you see the issues are and why this is such a critical issue just now, 4 months into this new school board.
Well, it is a new school board, and I think we need legal representation that represents the school board and the community and not the administrative staff. One, I didn't appreciate the locking into contracts when it was advised against it until we took office, that the previous board locked us into stuff
That was not under the recommendation of the attorneys. That was under the recommendation of the board, the 5 previous board members. And he acted upon our direction. That was not his suggestion, it was ours.
I would prefer attorneys that stood up to that.
Can you kind of clarify what you're talking about of having people that or having a legal counsel that represents the board as opposed to our administrators? And why would we look at things from that perspective as opposed to depending on those who we hire to manage the day-to-day operations of the district? Why? I guess I'm not clear on what you're really asking for relative to why that's such an important issue for the board.
Well, just to start with the superintendent's contract, it was changed in the last year. It takes some of the stuff that we should be responsible for, we should be overseeing away from us, and we have no say-so over, and I don't think that's proper, and I want an attorney that's going to stand for the community, not for the superintendent.
Okay, and just to allow clarification on that, because I was part of the old board, I can speak to that. Dr. Klein came to the board with an application as the superintendent. He was given the opportunity. We negotiated a contract with him using our attorney. He had his own legal counsel. The attorney represented the board. He gave the recommendations to his attorney and then our attorney. We worked through it. Our attorney represented us and represented us well. There were things that were modified in that contract. He went back and he spoke on our behalf and negotiated. Our attorney never represented him during that process at all. The board agreed to the terms to the contract. There were things that we did not agree to. There were modifications, and then there was other things that we absolutely agreed to. So that has no reflection on the attorney. He worked under the direction of the 5 board members.
So it sounds like one of the things that you really want is for legal counsel to review contracts of personnel.
One thing, yes.
You can't do that in the middle of a contract, from what I understand.
What other things do you want this legal counsel to address?
Well, I didn't appreciate the morning we met with legal counsel. I didn't like the answers I was given on a couple of the things that I questioned, that I don't think are necessarily proper. That may go against the grain of the
I'm fishing here. Are you referring to things that he implied law was the behind his recommendation, or are you thinking that his personal opinions came through?
The couple things that he wasn't, that I don't believe that are not legal, that he wasn't willing to tackle.
Sure. I think that it's very important during this whole entire process that we remember that the board does very little with our legal counsel, that a lot of it is driven by special education laws, and I think our special ed department spends a lot of time working with our attorneys to make sure that our special ed children are treated fairly and are treated according to the law. And I think it's going to be hard to find another firm that knows the laws specific around things like that. Now, I know employment law and things like, that's pretty standard. But when it comes to school law, I think it's going to be hard to find anybody to replace the ones that we have in that area. Just my own opinion. And I think it's going to take a lot of time to vet the process to ensure that if there's somebody out there that we could use that has the experience that may be cheaper or is just getting their feet wet, but yet they have the background we need, absolutely, there's a chance that we could go that direction. But I think to rush it at this time of the year is doing our students a disservice, because I think that we need to put all of our energy, and that all of the energy is not us, it's our administrative team, into getting these children wrapped up for the school year.
I almost get the impression that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I get the impression that you're more concerned about getting a specific legal opinion about issues that you have concerns about, as opposed to really driving what legal counsel the district may use relative to the issues that our administrators face on a daily basis. Am I hearing that correctly from your?
Only partially.
Okay. Well,
No,
help me understand.
I'm looking for people that can help the district that are knowledgeable in the business.
And it,
And we need, I think.
is that to
I'm not-
suggest that
I wasn't pleased, we may end up with the same ones, but I would like to look at others, and this isn't something new, this is something with, what was back in January?
No, I agree. I agree that
It's
it
not
would be a
something
good
new.
thing to do
It's
for
not
us to look
something
at
we've
the.
just, and I've asked for it to be put on the agenda. Tina's asked for it to be put on the agenda, and it's something I think we need to look at. I would like to see other legal firms looked at that may be better able to serve our district.
but you don't have somebody specifically in mind in terms of,
Oh, there's a couple that I like.
And you like them for what reason? I mean,
Well, the one I want on my side of the table rather than on the other side. And he's usually, his firm's usually on the other side of the table from us. And the other one is, I think is, I've talked with both of them and to feel them out what they do and how they do it, and I think they're both capable.
and they have experience with education?
Yeah, some. Maybe not in the same areas, but I don't know that the ones we're using has expertise in every area either, so.
Well, let me ask you this, or let me just make this statement, that if we make this decision quickly without being thorough and making sure that the firm that we're selecting to use is what we need. If we do a knee-jerk reaction,
I'm not asking for that.
well, if you're wanting it done now, instead of focusing on the end of the school year activities, you're kind of dividing his time a little bit inappropriately from where it needs to be, and something might get slipped through the cracks, and as a result, we may end up with a lawsuit that will cost us dearly.
I'm not asking for it to be done immediately.
But
I
if you're
just want-
asking-
the school year's over the 1st of June.
Absolutely, and that was
All right.
my
So
recommendation is to
basically
defer
the 1st of June,
this.
so if we can start vetting process right after the 1st of June instead of waiting till the end of June, let's get the ball rolling. Sending out an RFP is not a major, most places is not a major task.
And let me interject real quick. We were looking at dates the 2nd and 3rd week of June to actually bring law firms in, and we've got to agree on a date to be able to do that. And so we're looking at that right now. I agree with you. We need to get either letters or RFPs or whatever we're going to send to law firms out as quickly as we can, and we are in the process of processing that and editing what we have, and we'll certainly bring that to the board as quickly as we can to make sure that it's complete, and then we're looking for the things that you're asking for. I will also, we've had ongoing conversations about this, particularly in agenda setting meetings, and the president and the vice president of the board agreed to do this work in June after we got the school year completed. I feel pretty adamant about that because it is something that we need to dedicate focused time on. And right now, quite honestly, I don't need directors and others focused on this when we've got to get our kids wrapped up. And we're in school that first week of June. We still have kids with us through that first week of June. So that's why we were looking at dates the 2nd or 3rd week. My goal and timeline is still to be able to bring recommendations back from that committee at the final board meeting in June. And I don't recall, I think 26th rings a bell for some reason, but I know that last meeting's a Thursday. But my goal would be to bring that recommendation back from the committee to the board for consideration at that meeting.
I guess I'm still struggling a little bit. You've shared that you're looking for a legal counsel that represents, that better represents the community as opposed to our administrators? Or did I?
Yes,
Okay.
and the children.
You want to look at personnel contracts, and you don't like the answers we've gotten from our existing legal counsel. Are there other things beyond that?
Well, there's some things that I think we can be doing here that to better serve the children that we're not. And I didn't get a good feeling from Lamke.
Can you elaborate on what those things might be?
Constitutional things. First, Second Amendment type of things.
Okay.
Other constitutional things. The fact that we should have local control and we're being dictated to from DC.
But no attorney's going to change that.
Well,
I
They can
mean,
help us work on it. They're not gonna change it, but they can help us work on it. We've got to get our
yeah, but if they're
representatives to
working
do
on it, that's costing our taxpayers dollars because there's all the money, you know, throwing it out the window because they can't change law. They can't change that
I know
stuff.
they can't change the law, but they can advise us how we can go about having that done and getting rid of some of these mandates that are costing us tons of money that we don't get reimbursed for.
But the mandates are tied
They're
to,
tied to the legislation. That's right.
you're exactly right, but also tied to that is federal and state funding. If we lose that, we lose this, and then we're down back in the tank where we've been for the last 6 years with the finances. I mean, they have us over a barrel. They have us right where they want us to be. You follow our guidelines and our rules, or we cut your money off. Well, we're not in a position to say, okay, we're going to do it our way, because we don't have the community to say, let's do it our way, and here's our money to help you do it. I'd love to do it the way we want to do it, but we don't have that opportunity afforded to us. And there's no good attorney, I don't care if it's Mr. Finney or somebody else, they're not going to be able to lead us to the promised land without the money.
I guess in the big scheme of things, my thinking is geared really towards Dr. Klein and his administrative team, and I think when you look at the amount of time they spend working with their current legal counsel to walk in and say that we're going to make a change because that's what the board wants, I don't think is fair in any respect to the work and the effort and the time that our administrators have spent dealing with the day-to-day issues that they contend with a legal counsel. That being said, I'm really, I don't feel like, and I realize I'm just one person, but I don't feel like the things that you've talked about really holds an argument to doing a total upheaval for what they do on a day-to-day basis in the buildings. But I'm not necessarily opposed if the board itself determines that there's a need to have a separate legal counsel to address specific board issues. I have less of a problem with that than I do with driving a message back to Dr. Klein and his administrative team that they need to make a wholesale change. And so I've got kind of mixed emotions on how I'm looking at that whole thing. I recognize that this is a new board and there may be some very strong opinions relative to what certain board members want. I would hate to see us make a decision that would have a pretty dramatic impact on Dr. Klein and his staff when we may not really be looking at those issues as much as wanting some clarity amongst our board and in one respect or another in terms of what direction we may choose to be going in or not. So I just hate to see us do a wholesale wipeout of what we're currently working with. I think that's going to be really problematic. So.
And I agree with Mr. Lewis that I think we need to take a look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and does it make sense? Is there an opportunity for us to let them know we're vetting the process and maybe get a cheaper rate? I don't know. You know, I mean, there something good could come out of it.
Yeah,
but I just think that the timing is very poor.
Again, I'm not asking, do we do it in May? I'm waiting, let's get those back so we can start looking at them the 1st of June.
Well, to get it back by the 1st of June, they're going to have to spend May mailing, coordinating, and fielding phone calls. And then when those people want to know the status of their RFPs and all the rest of that stuff, they're going to have to field those calls. It's taking away from where their focus should be. And that's why I'm asking, or I put on the floor, the motion to delay that mailing of the RFPs till June 7th I guess maybe that's a Saturday, that following Monday or whatever, that first week, to get those mailed out, to get them back by the end of June.
You
and
don't
move
give them
forward.
any time to get an RFP, a reply back to us so we can discuss them. That's
Oh,
why
I
I'm
guarantee you
saying-
the attorneys are knowing that we're in the process of doing this, and they're probably sitting there waiting to go. It's just my hunch.
Well,
Go ahead.
what I would say is that we can certainly, I think we can hit the deadline of getting information out earlier than the beginning of June. My request really is focused on that's going to eat up some time, and we're going to have more of that time to be able to spend to actually go through the process, to have the committee review the RFPs, to have folks come in and do presentations for us, et cetera. I don't see that work being done prior to us being out of school. Certainly, we can continue our work, which we've already started, on pulling together that information to be able to send it out. And I certainly think we can probably get that information out more quickly than second week of June or whenever. I'd like to be interviewing firms so that I can meet timelines by the second, third week or so. But again, that's at the direction of the board.
Well, we've got a motion on the floor to delay it. Should we make a call for a vote on that? To
So
delay
your
it?
motion is to delay it till the end of June?
No, to the beginning of June, till after we're out of school, for them to start the process after school is out. To collect the RFPs and figure out, their meeting times and to get the presentations and everything rolling, the beginning to middle of June.
Okay, and who's seconded that? Did you?
I did.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I can't see why we can't mail out the RFPs early
I don't either.
and then hold them for viewing and then ask for appointments throughout June. It's just one of those, it's just a minor technicality, but I understand Doctor's concern about his time constraints. I thoroughly do. And I know he probably wouldn't be able to do justice to it, but I think the RFP should go out in the mail at least on the 1st, if not a week before that, to allow that simulation to occur. Because there won't be anybody coming in for interviews right away anyway.
I think you're going to start having a lot of people making phone calls and following up and expecting responses.
Well, there's work to be done. There's no
Right.
question about that.
Right.
Like I said, I think that we can certainly, I want to make sure that anything that we send out, letter or RFP, whichever format it ends up taking, the board's had an opportunity to look at, and I want to make sure that those are right, because much like the specs on the roof, we want to make sure that we've got the things in there that we want to take a look at, so that we are asking folks to present around the things that we want to know more about.
And how long would it, how much work, how long will that take? Can we get that out by the middle of May?
We will certainly do our best to try to do that. I'd like to bring things back to the board, like as I mentioned, I'd like to bring that back to the board and see if there's any additions or anything that you guys would like to include. But I think that we can make a reasonable attempt to try to get that piece of it out as quickly as possible. I do anticipate that will be able to be done prior to the 1st of June.
Now, you're talking the 1st of June, but he's talking the middle of May.
I'm looking for the RFP to go out in the middle of
Yeah,
May. With the responses back by the 1st of June.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to time that. And part of it, really, I was kind of beginning with the end in mind. What day are we going to sit down and talk to these folks, and then kind of work backward from there? And so I would like to ask that the board trust the timeline that we're putting together, that we've talked about, quite honestly, so that we can get the work done and make sure that it's quality work, so that we're getting the results that we are looking for when we get to the presentations.
Does the motion become amended at this point in time to reflect that timeline?
We have a motion and second on the floor, and unless those people who made the motion and the second choose to amend it, it would be at their choice as to whether or not they choose to amend or
I don't have a
approve the second.
problem amending it. My issue is that what happens if we have, and we've been known to have, some kind of an issue, and you've had to devote a lot of time to it, and those RFPs don't come out, by May 15th, as we've committed to tonight. I would rather keep my motion the way it is, and if you feel you can get them out and you want to do it early, that's your prerogative, and I would very much appreciate that. But know that I'm not going to write in your employee file that you did not comply with the direction of the board because you had hotter topics that needed to be addressed.
The unique and sometimes interesting part of spring in schools is we don't know what crops up on us.
You don't know.
But I am committed to moving the process forward and doing things the right way, but in a timely manner so that we can end up with the results back and make a recommendation to the board by the end of June. Again, I'm trying to set a date so that we can move backwards from there, and certainly you know, we will do our absolute best to get letters or RFPs or whatever we're going to send out sooner rather than later.
Take a vote.
I'd like to keep my motion the way it is, and if you feel that you can do it sooner than that, I would appreciate that work being done.
We'll do our best.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Mrs. Cropper?
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn,
No.
Mr. Lewis,
No.
Mr. Merchant.
No.
I'd like to place a motion on the floor that we have the RFPs out by mid-May so that we can have them back by the 1st of June and can start the process as soon as school's out.
Barring any unforeseen circumstances, because you do have a good point.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. This is where we have a huge conflict. You're supportive of the point that I just had. What I don't want to see is somebody get in extreme trouble if we have a principal that gets hit and killed, and he has to physically be in a building and he can't get the RFPs. That building takes top priority over everything.
Right.
And that's where I was going with, absolutely, it needs to be done. It needs to be done as soon as possible, but that soon as possible is reasonably the beginning of June, but sooner if you possibly can. I don't want to hold him to May 15th. We're at the end of April. We're at May 1st, Thursday. That's just really tight for him. And I'm just going to lay it out there that I don't know that we would have the support of the board if something like that was to happen. You're not happy with his contract. For you to say, I want him fired because he did not comply with my recommendation. I do not want that to happen.
Well, I'm sorry, but I've been in management a lot of years, and I know that every day you walk in, that you're told to plan, and your day starts out with, these are the things I'm going to get done today, and then you spend most of the day putting out fires from things you don't have. If something happened and a principal was killed, I don't think there's anybody on this board that's unreasonable that can't say, oh, well, okay, you can push that back, but ask us about it. But I don't think if, we're not planning on somebody being killed in the meantime.
Oh, absolutely
I think that
not.
we should go ahead and you know, somebody could be killed by the end of June, and we're going to push it off till December. You know, let's set a date.
Hold on, the kids are not in the buildings at that time. The kids take priority over everything.
Let's set a date and go with it. And if it needs to be changed, then Dr. Klein can come back to us and say, these are the things, would you change it? And we can say yay if it's reasonable. And so I would move to have it done, the RFP's out by the mid-May, 15th, whatever the date that falls on.
Okay, any other discussion?
All he did was put a motion on the floor. We haven't even had a second at this point.
Nobody seconded it yet.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Madam President, I'm going to respectfully ask that if you have a different idea, you may vote no and put another motion on the floor. Something that might be a little bit more palatable, given the tight time frame and the fact that you know, you've been on the board, how many activities we have for our administrative team to accomplish between now and the end of the school year. If you can think of another plan that might accomplish both goals, getting those done and meeting the needs of our students, which is number one top priority.
I can't help but say I'm of the belief there's a lot more to this, and there's a personal agenda involved, and I'm a bit disappointed that this is how we're going to move forward, but we'll find out here shortly.
Any other discussion?
It lacks respect for our staff.
That is not important.
But
What's
in my
important-
book, it is.
It's important for some that that agenda is moved forward. So.
Well, Dr. Klein, I take it that you don't feel you'll be able to do that by May the 15th, and you would rather have the RFPs go out the 1st of June rather than the middle of May?
My commitment.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from and what your time constraints are as far as for now till the end of May.
But my commitment to the board is and has been that we will work through the process as quickly as we possibly can, because I understand the sense of urgency that some board members have, giving me flexibility to be able to do my job and be able to put together RFPs, letters, whatever we're going to send out that are thoroughly accurate and right and have the right information in them is critically important. We will do our best to get those out as quickly as we can, but giving me that flexibility does allow me to attend to the needs of the district should something arise in between there. I'm very comfortable with the timeline that we had talked about and agreed to. My job as the administrator is to we talked about making a decision until June. My job as the district's administrator is to back up the process and to be able to deliver the product on that time frame. And so we've been talking about completing that by the end of June, by the end of June, that process. And again, administratively, it's on me to make sure that I deliver to the board the reports and the recommendations that come out of that process. So what I think would be most appreciated is the fact that you allow me to manage my time. I think I've proven pretty effectively that I can do that and get jobs done and deliver on a timely basis. So quite honestly, I don't see the need, honestly, to even set a date specifically, because as I've said, I think that I've worked hard and set a track record of delivering things on time for the board. So in my estimation, I'm not sure that any motion is necessary. I'd like to ask that you trust me to get the job done in the time frame that we've discussed previously.
Okay. Do you have any more discussion?
As long as we have it done by the end of May, or end of June, by the end of June, we don't need a motion, but
But then why didn't you support what I put on the floor?
We've been asking for this
Absolutely.
since January.
No, we agree.
We've asked for it 2 or 3 times,
completely
and it keeps getting pushed back and pushed back, and I don't want to keep pushing it back. I want to make sure it gets done.
But
We're on the same page.
We've also had a priority list. And that, when we all sat together in February and had a chance to add things to the priority list, legal counsel never came up. It only came up in the last month in this open discussion.
Well, it came up at the end of January.
The end of January.
It did not come up as a part of that.
No, it did not come up as part of that to-do list.
Right. And so we added it to the to-do list last month. But now
It's now superseded everything.
It's now jumping ahead of everything else.
It's not jumping ahead, just want to make sure it gets done.
Okay.
But above all is we need to make sure. No. Above all, we need to make sure that our children are prepared for this end of the school year and that our graduates graduate without any hitches. All of our children that need that extra, they've got what they need, and our focus is on the wrapping up of the school year. You're now taking not only Dr. Klein, but Mrs. Cropper, you're talking Mrs. Nazarene and others. Look at how much Mrs. Nazarene has to do with her special ed department. All of those kids that